Recording in
There's a similar instrument for healthcare decisions. It's called a healthcare proxy. You can appoint someone else to make those decisions for you. We'll talk about that later. But that's really what a power of attorney is. If you ever closed on a loan, you've probably given the bank the power to, modify documents and sign them to affect the loan. There are things that get done all the time that can be very limited or very broad.
Oh, what's durable mean? Because I hear about durable power of attorney. What's durable and non-durable?
So let me go back to just conceptually, if you think about it, that a principal theoretically is only able to give to the agent power that the principal has. And so durable means the power of attorney stays in place. It's not terminated by the principal's incapacity. And so in modern usage, we sometimes will have powers of attorney, we'll talk about that spring into effect at the incapacity of the principal. And so in the Alabama statute, the power of attorney is assumed to be durable unless it says otherwise. But in the old common law, it would terminate if the principal became incapacitated. So if the principal didn't have the capacity, it couldn't give it to the agent. In modern times, it can stay in place despite the agent's incapacity. The principal's incapacity, that's what it means by durable. It continues.
So if I designate power of attorney, a durable power of attorney would mean that if I don't get better, if I'm still unable to make decisions, that power of attorney would continue to exist.
That's right.
Okay, got it. Okay, Rev Dollie, what is an advanced medical directive?
So thank you. There are two pieces of an advanced medical directive, and the first is a living will, where you can say what you would want to happen or not happen if you are at a point where you cannot speak for yourself, whether you are terminally ill or injured or permanently unconscious, and those have to be determined by doctors who have examined you and have acknowledged that you're not able to make those decisions on yourself, but you do those things in advance. And then the other part is what Pete mentioned, which is your medical proxy or your decision maker is another term that we often use in the hospital. And it's not that you have to do both. You can do both. You can choose to do one piece and not the other. Some people have just done the living will part where they say what they do and do not want, whether they want artificial nutrition and hydration, or whether they want all the other life-sustaining kind of measures. And some just do that and say, just follow my instructions here in this document. And then in the Alabama form, you have the option again of doing or assigning somebody as your medical proxy, but you can also make 3 decisions about them. You can say that they have to follow exactly what you have said in the form. You can give them some leeway to make decisions about things you have not discussed in the living will that you have created. And you can also say they have free range to make whatever decisions they deem necessary, which could mean it's something very different from what you decided at the time that you created the living will.
So it's very complicated. I think, why don't we go through the legal, financial power of attorney initially, and then we'll talk about the healthcare proxy and the advanced directives, advanced medical directives. Oh, we're missing a form. Oh, sorry. And we have some stuff in the back. And here, help yourself. I think I probably have.
Okay, so
But let's just start with the financial power of attorney. Why is it important to have a POA?
Well, one of the reasons it's important is that it allows you to designate someone you trust to manage your property and your finances if you're unable to do so, or if you're incapacitated. And if you don't do that, and you become incapacitated, then the court might have to appoint a conservator to manage your property if you're incapacitated, or a guardian to make decisions for you on your behalf if you're incapacitated. And you don't necessarily have a say in who the conservator or the guardian is. However, the power of attorney form allows you to nominate a person to be your conservator or guardian if once you need to be appointed. And the court has to take that nomination and give it good weight, unless there's a reason that the person shouldn't do it. Your decision to appoint that person, nominate that person in your power of attorney form is given a considerable weight.
So in other words, I can nominate X. I could say I want X to be my POA, but ultimately the court will say A or nay?
No, the power of attorney you designate. But if you were to become incapacitated without a power of attorney and your property is being wasted or going away, then the court would appoint a conservator to manage the property and a guardian to make decisions for you. But your nomination in the form, you can designate someone that you want to be appointed by the court if that's necessary.
Okay. And then the court, okay, I understand. Now, how do you choose? I mean, how do you choose a power of attorney? Should it be your firstborn child, or how do you choose them?
Well, I think what I would do is talk to the person I wanted to have do it and make sure they understood what my wishes or expectations were, and talk to them about the power I plan to give them, make sure they're willing to act in accordance with that power. And then I'd want to make sure that there's someone I trust to do it, and also that I feel they have the skills to do what needs to be done. I wouldn't nominate a 14-year-old child, well, they're too young, but you can do it at 19. But if someone doesn't, if you have complex financial matters, you need someone who kind of understands it or what you want, because they're going to be acting in your place. And so I'll get to it later, but that's one of the duties of the agent, is to act as if the way the principal would like. So you need to make sure your agent understands what you would like them to do.
Okay. And can you have more than one power of attorney?
You can. In the form, the Alabama form that we gave you, as it's set up, and it says that in the beginning, if you look down on the first page, about the fifth paragraph down, it says the form provides the designation of one agent. If you wish to name more than one agent, you can name a co-agent with special instructions. Co-agents are not required to act together unless you include that requirement in the special instructions. So yeah, you could have more than one. You could designate two or more, and you could require that they act in concert. I caution about that. If you have two and they don't agree, what's going to happen? So somebody at some point may have to make a decision. But you can, joint decisions can become an issue. So you're pre-planning to have someone make the decisions. If you're not careful about how you do joint decisions, you may end up having them have a fight in court about who should make the decision if they can't agree. But you can't have code.
So can you name like a primary and a secondary power of attorney?
Well, that's yes, you can say if one person, that's a different issue than code. That's if it would be Denyse first, and if Denyse is unable to do it or resigns, then I want Dollie to do it. The other would be I want Denyse and Dollie together to make the decision.
So, what can a power of attorney not do? If I designate you as my power of attorney, am I going to wake up one day and find my house has been sold underneath me, even though I am fully clothed in my right mind, so to speak?
Well, one thing you can do about that is you can make the power of attorney and the special instructions go into effect upon your incapacity. So unless you were incapacitated, you would be there would be no power of attorney. And that can be done, and you can also decide who makes that decision. It would probably be good to say, if my doctor determines or so-and-so determines that I'm incapacitated, then this power of attorney goes into effect.
So we had a patient a few months ago in one of our ICUs, and his situation became an ethics consult. The nurse asked me to she was trying to get my opinion on what she should do or how she advised him. And the man had made his sister his power of attorney. And then he became ill where he could not handle his own business. He went into a nursing home, but I believe while he was incapacitated, or maybe not still incapacitated, she either sold some of his property or did something that he really did not want done. And so the question became how they could terminate or end that, because she was not making decisions and he was able to speak for himself at that time.
So unless you put in activation trigger, the power of attorney is going to become effective at the day you execute it. Now, in the form, you check boxes of what you want the people to do. If you look in that power of attorney form that I handed out, you can see where you can check boxes. I want them to have power over my real estate, or you cannot check that. Tangible property, commodities or options, stocks and bonds. You can go through the whole thing you want. On the 4th page in that document, it says, my agent may not do any of the following unless I have initialed the specific authority based below. So they can't normally, without your explicit approval, create, amend, revoke, or terminate a trust. Can't do a trust. They can't make a gift that exceeds the monetary limitations in the Alabama Power of Attorney Act, which is really tied to tax, the U.S. tax code. They can't create or change a right of survivorship. They can't change a beneficiary designation. They can't authorize another person to exercise the authority granted under this power of attorney. They can't waive the principal's right to be a beneficiary of a joint and survivor annuity. And they can't exercise fiduciary powers that the principal has authority to delegate. So you can limit what they can do, or you can give them absolute total authority. It's going to be how the form is filled out and executed.
So you really have to be careful about filling out this form. I mean, you can't just do it on a Saturday over a beer. I mean, it's
no, I think, yeah, you do need to be careful. And also, I think it's key, and that's sort of what Dollie was talking about earlier, how we can help each other in our church communities. If you have someone in the community you trust, and if you take on the responsibility to be the agent of a friend or a family member or a church member, you have a responsibility to do that properly. And if people act within those guidelines, there shouldn't be a problem. The problems arise when people decide to put their self-interest ahead of the principal's interest.
Now, does a power of attorney continue after you die?
No, power of attorney terminates on the principal's death.
And what if I'm incapacitated today and then miraculously I wake up tomorrow? What happens to my power of attorney then?
It depends on how you set it up. If it was springing only, you could also have it terminate on a particular act. So you could have it spring into effect on your incapacity and terminate at your incapacity. However, if you have the capacity, you can terminate the power of attorney. The principal can terminate it at any time if they have the capacity to do it. So if it sprung into effect and you were incapacitated and you regained capacity and said, I no longer want this, then you would terminate it.
But I'd have to go to a judge to do that?
No, you could, hold on just a second, let me look at this section. There's 3 ways you do it. You can so you terminate, hold on. Just get this right. What is that? Sorry, I marked the whole statute, so if questions like this came up, I can look them up. Section.
Oh, it's good to have a lawyer here because we're going to get it straight from the horse's mouth.
So 110 says that Okay, you can terminate it by letting people know, so you can tell the agent that it's been terminated. You can also make someone who's a caregiver know that it's been terminated. You need to communicate with somebody. And you could always get you could go to court if you had to, but you shouldn't have to. You got to notify people that it's been done if you're going to terminate it.
So in theory, I'm incapacitated, I come back, I say, okay, well, thank you, Pete, you were a great power of attorney, but you're fired for now. And that should take care of it.
Yes.
Now, you may want to take me to court, but that's how it would go, basically, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But you have to be able to remember to say it, unless you predetermine.
The question is, do you have to remember to say it to someone or document it unless you predetermine that you're terminating?
You would have to take some act to terminate. If you had it spring into effect and had no provision for its termination, then you would need to terminate it.
So, if you predetermined, I'm just making.
Well, let's
So
repeat
you're
people on
saying that
Zoom.
you can, oh, okay, yeah. So, you just said this, so I'm just making sure I understand. You can predetermine it, that basically when you got your capacity back, that BOA ends automatically. As long as you have that on there, you don't have to remember. Is that what you're saying? Am I?
Yes.
Okay. I
Yes.
just wanted to make sure, I know you said that already, but I just
You would
wanted
need
to
to
make
make
sure I
it real
understood.
clear in the document that it terminates at this point.
Okay, so you can, yeah, that's it, thank you.
Thank you, Liz. So, this is very complicated. So my question now is, do I have to hire a lawyer to do this? I mean, in theory, can I do this on my own?
You could do it on your own. Both the forms we handed out, the healthcare power of attorney, the living will form, that's called the advanced directive, and this power of attorney form could be filled out, but you need to know what you're doing. So if you have questions, I would consult with someone if you're not sure what powers you're granting.
Okay, for those on Zoom, if you put your contact information in the chat, we'll make sure that you
I
get
put
it.
the link.
Oh, never mind. Once again, I'm behind the 8 ball. The link is
I
in
put
the
link
chat.
to the document.
Okay.
So just you can check the link, and if it's not working, just please type in there. But I made it available to anybody who has the link. So if you check chat and click on that link, it should take you to the document that Pete is talking about for power of attorney.
Perfect. I'm gonna open it up to questions in just a minute. Let me just get through a couple more things, and then we'll have a discussion. Then we can move on to healthcare. So, what are the biggest mistakes you've seen, Pete?
I don't really do a ton of this, so I haven't seen a whole lot of mistakes. I know they get litigated and stuff when people do it. I think, my thought would be, if you appoint someone that you don't trust, or you have no reason to trust, and you they don't have the ability to do what needs to be done, that would be a problem. I think another one is, I would make sure if you have family members who think it's their obligation by birthright to do these things, and you don't want them to, that you communicate that and make it clear to them why you're appointing a friend or a church member as opposed to them, because they'll want to intervene in those decisions. I think it should be communicated to them so you don't have a fight between your power of attorney and a family member that you didn't want to have happen.
So I think, one of our later sessions will be how to handle difficult conversations. And I think what you're saying is very important, that it's great to document stuff, but it's important to communicate. Communicate to who you're choosing as power of attorney, maybe communicate to family, and explain to them why you choose person A over person B. So I filled out this form, it looks great, I've signed it, sealed it. What do I do with it? I mean, it's in a drawer it's in my underwear drawer.
Well,
What am I supposed to do with it?
if it's the advanced directive, you need to make sure that the medical care providers, when you're in the hospital, have a copy of it, because they're going to have to adhere to it.
For advanced directives, first thing I do because we are tasked with assisting people with that in the hospital. So that primarily falls on chaplains, but we'll talk about why later. But first thing I do, I make hard copies, and I take one hard copy and I put it on the medical chart, and then after they have been discharged and the medical chart is scanned into the medical records, then it is there, but they can see that you have an advance directive and it's been added to your medical chart. I will make a couple of extra hard copies, for example, to give to their medical proxies if they've decided on somebody having one. I just believe in having extra copies. And then I also tell people you should either scan it or take pictures of it, email it to yourself, or put it in the cloud these days, because that way when you need to access it, you may not be able to go to your sock drawer, your underwear drawer, or whatever. Somebody may not be able to get that there. But if it is somewhere in email or in the cloud somewhere, you can access it and send it that way.
I wonder if you could put a copy, on my phone is a place for emergencies. I wonder if you could put a copy or a link there.
That is putting it in the cloud. Okay, so you can save it to Google Drive or iCloud or one of those kinds of things. If you're taking pictures of it, you can save it, in your photos. So those are ways that you can do it, because you can use your camera these days on your phone and you can scan things. And a lot of people may not have a copier at home these days, or they may not go to, we don't have Kinko's anymore, FedEx office or whatever. But you can always use your phone if you have a smartphone, a good smartphone, and then you can save it to your Gmail drive or your iCloud, or Dropbox, whichever one of those you use. And you can also, if you want to, save it in your photos, or however it is, you may save something so that you can access it wherever you are.
One other thing while we're on it, and I think Dollie would have worked with this more, but on that healthcare power of attorney or living will, I think it's really important you talk to the healthcare provider so there's no disagreement in their mind with what you want and what you won't. They're going to have to do it, right? They'll have to terminate the procedure and not do X and Y. It's important that you all are on the same page. You may think you said it, and they read it totally differently.
Okay, before we transition into the advanced directives, just a couple of questions. What if you get asked to serve as a power of attorney? What are your responsibilities, and what questions should you be asking before you agree to do it?
Okay, so the duties are set forth in the statute as well. And as a power of attorney, it's if you become the agent, you've got to act in accordance with the principal's reasonable expectations to the extent actually known by the agent or otherwise in the principal's best interest. So if you don't know what the principal wants you to do, you should have that conversation ahead of time. You need to make sure that you're acting in their best interest, not your own. So selling the principal's car to pay your mortgage is not acting in the principal's best interest. Those are obviously what you can't do. You need to act in good faith. You need to act only within the scope of the authority granted in the power of attorney. If the principal says, don't touch my bank accounts, then you don't have authority to do anything in the bank accounts. Then you have to act. If you take, the way you accept it, it used to be in writing, and you'll see in the healthcare proxy, the proxy's got to sign that they accept the proxy. In the Power of Attorney Act, it no longer has to be accepted in writing. You could make that a requirement. But if the agent starts to act as if they have the authority, then by action they've accepted the appointment. So you've got to act loyally for the principal's benefit. You act so as not to create a conflict of interest that impairs your ability to act impartially in the principal's best interest. You act with care, competence, and diligence ordinarily exercised by agents under similar circumstances. You keep a record of all receipts, disbursements, and transactions made on behalf of the principal. Those are the things that you need to do. So if you're not able to do those things, I wouldn't take the appointment.
One last question before we open up. So, a woman I know was named power of attorney for her next door neighbor who developed dementia. The woman died, and so the power of attorney, so the neighbor basically, had to fix up the house, put the house on the market, do all this, under the supervision of a judge. It was a lot of work. So what happens if you agree to be power of attorney and it becomes too overwhelming?
You can always resign from the power of attorney, and one of the ways you do that, and one second, it's in the statute too. So, and I was confused a little bit ago when I was telling you how you give notice. If you terminate, tell the agent, that's going to be enough through the principal. But if the agent terminates, the agent needs to let the principal know, and if the principal doesn't have capacity, then the agent's got to let a caregiver know, or another personally reasonably believed by the agent to have sufficient interest in the principal's welfare, or if a government agency is involved, like Alabama Health, Health and Human Services or someone, you need to let them know as well if you're resigning, so that they know you're no longer acting.
Wow, so this is pretty complicated. Questions from the audience? I know, Nancy, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Denyse. If, going back to when there was a possibility of...
Okay, hold on, Nancy, we can't hear you.
I think my question is...
Nancy, we can't hear you. Speak up a little bit, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Can terminating be done anytime? Would it be the same kind of thing, whether terminating after the person has lost capacity or not? In other words, I've not lost capacity, I've decided that this is not the person. Tell me what the paperwork for that would be.
I would give them a notice of termination, because one of the things the agent has to do, if called upon by, because they're doing business in your place, they've got to certify that you're still alive and that the power hasn't been revoked. So I make sure the agent knows you revoked it. Then I would destroy the document. Then no one, they can't. That's one way to do it. But you need to let them know, because if they deal with a bank in your stead, the bank's going to require them to certify that you're alive, that the power hasn't been revoked. So you need to make sure they know you've revoked it. But you can revoke it, issue it today, and revoke it in an hour.
Thank you.
I'm curious about the last example, Denyse, that you gave with your friend who had designated her neighbor as a power of attorney, and then she died. So under what authority is the power of attorney still operating?
I had the same question when Denyse was given that scenario. I would think the attorney's authority terminated with her, and what would happen is the executor of the estate would be responsible for the assets of the estate. I'm not quite sure how the neighbor got hooked in as a power of attorney, because my understanding would be they had no power at her point of death.
She might have been the executor.
Yeah, she could have been.
And I might have been confused, which has happened every now and then. Nancy?
And I can imagine that absent, their surgeon, executor is surgeon for somebody, they might try to go back to that person whose power has been terminated because the person has died. But good luck to trying to get out of all that work.
Well, you have no, as pointed out, if the principal's dead, you have no authority at that point to act.
Just one more question on that point. Can I put in my power of attorney document that I want Mary Smith to be my power of attorney and to be my executor? Or do I have to do a widow? Do I have to do that in a separate document?
There are two separate documents. I know you can put in you want someone to be appointed as a conservator or guardian in your power of attorney form, but that's why you're alive. The executor comes into play after you've passed away. So I think the more conservative thing would be to have in a will as well. Because there are two different situations you can.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, I didn't understand that when I was a POA for my father. And so I'm just saying, it seems so obvious, but I was really shocked to learn that, you know, that I wasn't gonna be able to help after he died. They are two totally separate, there's a big bright line there. And it was all good, but I didn't know it, so I'm just saying, let your person who's the POA, let them I would assume they don't understand that it ends when you die. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, because that was a bright line of understanding. Okay, I wanted to ask you, and I have a couple questions, but one is, I learned the hard way that you have to update your POA in order for it to be legally recognized. And back then, I think it was 5 years. Does that sound correct to you?
I don't think there's, in this new statute, I don't see anything that says it terminates after a particular period of time. This
Okay.
new statute is kind of a uniform statute, so it's a little broader.
Okay.
You know, that may be the case, I don't know.
I think it was a financial institution that said, oh, your dad did this over 5 years ago or whatever, you have to update it. So we had to update it. I don't know what we had to do. It was a big pain.
I do think it would be good to review them annually, you know, at least make sure that's still what you want to happen.
Right.
And then on your healthcare power, or your advanced directive, I'd make sure I look at it before I go into for any significant medical procedure.
Okay. Can I keep talking?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I wanted to make a point. Dollie talked about putting it on your phone and putting it in the cloud. You have to give people access to your phone. Whoever your POA is, you need to be able to.
You can email it to them and they can save it on theirs.
Good point.
Okay, so
Even better.
We have access. If you send it to somebody,
Gotcha.
they can save it for themselves or
Wherever it's
whatever it is
helpful.
whatever they need to do.
Yeah.
So they don't have to have access to your email or your drive or your whatever. Just send it to them too. Or share it with them, because that's a feature. You can share it with them and then they can do whatever they need to do from there.
Right. And two more things, and I'm going to shut up. One is, this has occurred to me over and over again, and Dollie, I bet you have real examples of this happening. We have adult children who are not married. And so, there's no POA for them. If they were to, God forbid, if something were to happen to them, we're not parents anymore. They're 18 and over. And so, we should do this probably for them, right?
If they want you to.
Or whoever, it doesn't have to be us, by the way. I didn't mean to assume that it would be us, but they need to.
Sure. It would be a good idea for them, because any of us can have, particularly on the healthcare stuff, any of us can get in a car wreck or anything else, and these issues can come into play regardless of age.
Right,
It's good to think about that. If something were to happen to you, who would you want to make these decisions?
right.
I was just going to add that that's particularly important, for example, if you're a member of the LGBTQIA community, because if you are not married and you do not have children, and you do not have a power of attorney, and you do not have an advanced medical directive, your legal next of kin, which would be your parent, would make the decision. And if that person is homophobic, for example, you may have someone making decisions that you would not agree with. So it's even, the other day I was driving on I-20, and my car, my little Mazda 3, met an 18-wheeler. I hadn't planned for that, but had I ended up in an ICU somewhere, someone would have to make decisions for me. And it's always good to be prepared regardless of how old you are.
Yes.
To answer your question, I looked in the statute and it says, unless the power of attorney otherwise provides, an agent's authority is exercisable under the authority terminates under section B, notwithstanding the lapse of time since the execution of the power of attorney. So there is no.
There's no time.
Now, you could have a financial institution that requires an updated document to protect themselves.
I see, okay, good point. And Nancy I was gonna ask Dollie, this is what I hear all the time. Like, basically, you put all these specifics about medical things that you don't want, but even with an advanced directive, they kind of have to do what they have to do. Do you recommend those specifics? And I will tell you one thing that happened to me with my own dad, is when he had a stroke, like, I would never normally do this, which is we had to put a peg tube in. He couldn't eat through the mouth, and the only way I could get him into a rehab, the only way was that we had to get a peg tube, the feeding tube, essentially a feeding tube, which, oh my gosh, how many times have we all heard, never do a feeding tube, never do it, you do not want that. It was the right decision for Dad. It allowed him to get into he would not have been allowed in if we had not had the peg tube. They would not do an NG tube at the rehab. Yeah. So it was absolutely
even
gave
in
him
the
an
hospital,
option.
an NG tube can only be in for like 3 weeks.
Like a certain amount of time. So I'm just saying that it seems so simple. Like, no, I don't want it, but it's not.
There are people who don't want that, and if they've specified it.
Then that was the
Right,
idea.
unless they've designated somebody as their medical proxy and have given the medical proxy to make decisions about any and everything, even if it goes against their wishes. But if they have specified in their living will.
I know, it just makes
But if they've specified they don't want a peg tube or feeding tube, or they don't want a trach, which has happened, but it means they will die, then they don't want that. And if they have not said, okay, I'm assigning so-and-so as a medical proxy, and they can make decisions that are even contrary to what I've indicated here.
okay.
Then, or if there's something that just was not specified, that's the other option. So some people just check the boxes and initial, and they don't add anything other than yes or no.
Right.
So if they have said medical proxy can make decisions about things I have not covered here, then the medical proxy can do that. If they've said this is what I want, and they put it in there, I don't want a feeding tube, I don't want a trach,
Yeah.
I don't want to be on a ventilator or whatever, or I want such and such, then unless they have specified that the proxy can make whatever decisions, then the medical community is really supposed to go by what is in the document.
Okay. So it sounds like a proxy is the way to go. If you want some.
Yeah, we're gonna go on to medical in just a minute,
Okay.
yeah, because I think that there's some nuances there.
Gotcha.
Thank you, mine is back to Pete. Is this form nearly universal across 50 states?
If you're part of the Uniform Act state, then you should accept these powers. But I don't know that for sure. Like, I don't know if Georgia would accept it. That would be a question. But if you're living in Alabama and your property's in Alabama, then that's the state that counts.
Thank you, I understand that. It just occurred to me that because my power of attorney, and if I go to join one whose power of attorney currently and will continue is in Ohio, his brother is in Texas, and they may not be thinking of whether there are different aspects to the form.
The appointment would, if you're here in Alabama as the
Right.
principal, your power of attorney is controlled by Alabama law, regardless of whether they're in Texas or Ohio, they would operate.
Right, I just need to make sure that they are seeing the Alabama form, and we might be talking about it not face to face, In fact, the POA, we have not gone through the details of this. It's a very general aspect of POA that he has accepted. Thank you.
Any other POA questions? Oh, yes.
Mine's not so much a question as maybe a clarification, but Liz, you were talking, if you're unmarried children with no children, if something happens to them, you're automatically, as if they haven't designated anybody, because you're next of kin. So, but I'll speak from personal experience.
If they can't make decisions for themselves.
Yeah, if they're incapacitated or unable to. But I know from personal experience, when my brother-in-law fell very ill a year and a half ago, his parents are dead, and so his two brothers were next of kin, and it was really awkward and difficult to maneuver making decisions with him in Huntsville and us here making decisions on his behalf. So I think it's more important, if your parents aren't alive and you're unmarried and don't have children, get a power of attorney so your siblings aren't having to, do that all the time. That's
Another thing I would mention, because I know we're going to go into the health care, but there's a little form that the Alabama Hospital Association had on their website.
As well as provided when you're being admitted to the hospital. So let's,
kind of assess their understanding of what they understand about being terminally ill and injured, right? Or whether they want to have life-sustaining treatments or they want to limit certain life-sustaining treatments. As we were talking about earlier, some don't want a peg tube, or feeding tube rather, or a trach, which helps them to breathe because they can't stay on the ventilator forever. And so if you put that in a document, then that kind of gives some insight and guidance to the doctors and the nurses, to our palliative care staff, to our ethics people as well. So, but I don't tell people what to put in there. And it's more of a guided conversation about what your concerns are. And then also I think it is a conversation about what are your values? What is important to you? And how can you reflect that in creating this document? Which, by the way, as Pete said about, power of attorney document, now you can sign this, complete it, have it witnessed by two people who are not related by blood, marriage, or adoption, which is why a lot of times we do that. And you can tear it up the next minute and do another one if you change your mind. So it's not something that's written in stone. So what you might want to do is to just reassess for yourself, where am I? And when it comes to these issues and concerns, and what do I want to happen to me now? Because it may be different, or you may have some more information, or your health may have changed in certain ways that now you have some specific things that you might want to put in there that you do not want. And there is a space in this document for you to write down things that are not covered, additional directions, okay?
So, you hear, at least when you go to the hospital, you hear a lot of DNR, DNI, comfort care. Can you talk a little bit about some of those terms and what they mean?
Okay, so for one thing, those are not, that's not necessarily what this covers. DNR means do not resuscitate. DNI means do not intubate. What did you, oh, comfort care. So comfort care means that we are transitioning from curative measures to just keeping a person comfortable, which is really what the general philosophy of hospice care is. Now hospice, more so, it refers to what they consider end of life, and they typically are looking at 6 months or less to kind of make you eligible for general hospice care, likely not in the hospital itself. That's a much shorter time frame there. But comfort care means that we're not trying to cure, or this cannot be cured, and we're not seeking to do all of these aggressive and heroic measures to try to keep you alive, whatever that looks like.
Should there be a special provision? Should you include in your advance directive a special provision for dementia? Would that be something worth thinking about?
Okay, let's see. I think in that's not technically covered. Here, what we're talking about is terminally ill or injured, which means that your doctor and another doctor decide that you have a condition that cannot be cured and that you will likely die in the near future from that condition. And then you have permanently unconscious, which means that your doctor and another doctor agree within a reasonable degree of medical certainty that you're no longer able to think, feel anything, knowingly move or be aware of being alive. So this becomes a space, though, where people may have to make decisions for you. And so it could be your next of kin, just whoever the legal next of kin is, if you don't have one of these. If you have one of these, you can specify that this person can make that decision. And that goes back to an issue of capacity, which is really outside of our realm as chaplains. It really more is in the scope of what the doctors have assessed, and our ethics manager, she works with them as well to talk about capacity and how you deal with issues where a person has dementia. So somebody else has to serve as decision maker. But if you have not done this, then we're looking at that list of next of kin. So, of course, the first would be a legal spouse, if you have one, and then a child. So, and this gets really complicated because families have all kinds of situations and arrangements, and they have people who have been looking out for them or taking care of them, but they may not legally be the next person in line to make the decision. And if that's the case, then the person who is legally in line to make the decision either has to make it or needs to give that power over to some other person.
So it does get very complicated. I think what I'm getting out of this discussion is a couple of things. First of all, power of attorney, advanced directives, those are not an event. It's sort of an ongoing process, an ongoing conversation that needs to be reevaluated and because things change, everything changes. So it's really important to keep this not in front of mind, but
well, but I think especially, as we are aging, particularly, or taking care of people who are aging, it's important to try to have the conversations while you're able to do so, which is why I have this document, your conversation starter guide. I think it is more extensive, but it can help you to think about or help somebody that you're assisting to think about what they do or do not want. And then here's a shorter little brochure that goes along with the Advanced Directive for Healthcare. And these are all actually on the Alabama Hospital Association website, so alaha.org. So alaha.org. And then they have a toolkit on there for congregations or organizations that are trying to help their community and their members to have these kinds of conversations and do this work.
Yeah, I wanted to add one thing. We're looking at a lot, which is good from the perspective of what we want, but thinking about it in a church community or whatever, if you've asked a co-church member to be your healthcare proxy, I think it's really important to let them know what you want, because if they're having to face down your family and make a decision of whether you get life-sustaining treatment, you need to make sure they know that they're speaking for you. So otherwise, you put them in a tough position. And that's why I think the form, if you don't want that stuff, be clear, and you can indicate they don't have the authority, or you can say they do have the authority to override what I've said. But you need to be clear. I think that helps the person who's helping you, because they're going to be in a tough situation if the grandkids are saying, don't kill grandma.
And those things happen because, and this is another reason why we are part of the conversation. These are very emotional topics and emotional situations, particularly if you have not had these conversations and done this work prior to you showing up at the hospital. And even if you do.
Even when you do, it's
when you do, yeah, because people have different perspectives. And we do have, cultures where it is never going to be one person who makes a decision. It is a collaborative decision-making process, which takes longer. It can be frustrating for hospital personnel, but they have the right to to have those conversations within the family, because that's how they make decisions. And if that one person, because we can't have a list of 10 people as decision maker. At the hospital, there's one person on your document, on your chart, and that's who we're going to talk to. So,
It's not a democracy.
It is not a democracy. So but we also recognize that if that person just makes whatever decision they want to make without having the conversations with the family, the siblings or the whoever, then they're going to be ostracized and hated, and they will never be able to be in peace for the rest of their lives and the family. So there are all of those dynamics.
And let me just add one more thing, organ donation. It's great to have an organ donor card, but again, you need to talk to your family, talk to the people who make decisions, because if you have your signed organ donor card, but your legal next of kin does not want you, wants you to go up to heaven intact, the hospital will probably err on the side of your legal next of kin. So it's really important that you have these discussions while you're alive, while you're capable of doing it.
Okay, so since you brought that up, so two things. One is that when somebody is listed as a dying patient in our system, which means we're moving from curative measures to comfort care, or they're about to die. There's a process where the nurses have to contact Legacy of Hope, who handles organ donations, and I think the Eye Foundation or whoever. So they have to do that, which is complicated for families because they're grieving, and they really don't want to talk about you coming in there talking about, well, do you want to donate your mother's organs or whoever's organs? But that is a part of the process as well. So.
And if you have that discussion beforehand, it's so helpful for the family. Well, he always wanted to be an organ donor.
Right. And but now, if you're in the system at UAB as somebody, you've signed up and said you want to do that, or you want your body to be donated to science, which I had happen with a man who came into our emergency room dead on arrival, but his grandson, who was the only relative in town, was very much aware that his grandfather had said he wanted his body donated to scientific research. And so once he said that, then the nurse was able to make the contact with UAB, and then that changed the disposition of the body.
All right, let me open the floor to questions.
Mine's not a question so much as just to emphasize the discussing it part and doing it on the regular, sort of, or at least don't just think you can do it once and that it's done. Because I know when hospice came in and asked us, do we want to put a DNR on my dad, I knew what Dad would want. I knew that he would want, a DNR. He'd made that clear many times. I believe in that. I don't want to be hanging on, just because, or brain dead, or whatever. But it was hard. It was hard to look at that nurse and say, yeah, put it down.
Well, and so again, this, like you said, it goes back to having the conversations, but also in this whole goals of care conversation thing. Yes, we can only get the final decision from this one person who's identified as either legal next of kin or as your medical proxy per this document, right? But we do also, in the ethical conversation, there's a conversation, or people who our ethics manager calls our values bucket people. So people who know the individual, and it may not be the family, because you have people that are estranged from families, and they show up in the hospital. Their family don't know what they want. They don't even talk to each other. They have not seen each other in 20 years. sometimes for very good reasons, but they have friends or neighbors or whoever who have been around them every day and have had conversations. We had one situation, this man and woman, they had been separated for 30 years, and he had, gone off, I think he was living with her former best friend, or whatever, but they were separated, they never got divorced. So, she had grown children, she had a grandson, one of the grandsons lived with her, one of the daughters lived with her, but they couldn't make decisions, right? Because she was still legally married. And he was the legal decision maker. But because they were still at least in communication to some extent, and they'd had some conversations based on what happened after other friends died and what decisions they made, he was able to also provide insight into her values. Now, the daughter, or at least one of the daughters and the grandson wanted something different. But he had the insight because he at least had had those conversations with her at some point and was able to say she would not want to continue indefinitely, on some machine.
It was a gift to me not to have to wonder, had my dad changed his mind, because I only knew what he wanted 20 years ago. I knew what he wanted, and that eased a very difficult situation otherwise. So, you're doing a gift to the people you're leaving behind if you make clear what your wishes are and update that from time to time, or not even update it, just, refer back to it.
Yeah, I had a similar, it was so hard to actually sign it when he went to the hospital with a stroke. I never thought I would be that way. But a funny story is when he was redoing his will before he was incapacitated later. But anyway, I was a full-grown adult with children and everything, and our cat had recently passed, and I went back and forth about when to put our cat down, and my dad just looked right at me and said, I don't know if you're the one, Liz. You had so much trouble with the song about Popeye. I'm not sure how it's gonna go for me. I was like, yeah, that's not fun.
Well, but I think it's good to inject some humor because these are heavy conversations. So we have to find ways to, even with such weighty topics, add some humor or some levity or lighten up the mood, but still have the conversation and talk about what we do and do not want. But that means we have to prayerfully think about what we do and do not want, which means we have to think about our own mortality and our death. And so let me just ask, how many of us have an advance directive? Okay, very good, okay. Good.
But where is it? Mine is in my underwear drawer. No, not quite.
We're going to, okay, but a lot of people would not be able to say that, but you have to deal with yourself, right? And there are just a lot of emotions that come with having to think about the fact I'm not going to be here forever. And it may not be that I get to 80 or 85 or whatever. I just turned 62 in December. I may not get to 80. I may not get to tomorrow. I have people in the hospital who are much younger than me, who are dying on a regular basis, or who are in a position for different reasons where somebody is having to make these decisions about their lives.
I just was wondering, and Nancy, you had your hand up. You were talking about organ donation, and you might know this as a doctor. Is there, it occurred to me, my dad was so much older, and also my mother had cancer and had chemo. Is there like an age limit to where you don't, where the medical, like your body's not helpful anymore? I was just curious about that.
There's not really an age limit, but there may be limits to what you can donate. So corneas, for example, you can donate. I think so. I don't think there's an age limit for that, for example. So one of the things that people from Legacy of Hope will really sit down and go over with you, sort of what you can donate. You know, you can donate tissues too, like ligaments and tendons.
And some of that is assessed by, by Legacy. Some of that is assessed by Legacy of Hope in conversation with the nurses to talk about, medical, what's going on medically, which may move people out from time.
I have a friend at UAB who's in charge of donating your body for medical research, and you need to research that in advance and sign up in advance.
I know my parents did that in West Virginia, so when my dad died, he was 90, and we just called this number, and they came to the funeral home and picked him up, and then because of COVID, it was like 3 years later, they said it'd be 2, they sent a box with the remains, and they were done with what.
Really?
Yeah. And the same with my mother, they would take it, and then they would send you the remains back.
Wow. I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
Sonia's hand
I mean, that
up.
they would bring
Sonia has her hand up on Zoom.
I would need the microphone.
It's been up for a minute.
Okay, Sonia.
Can you hear me? Okay. Pete mentioned that you might have to friends might have to stare down family members, or some family members might have to stare down other family members. My mom died in the ER 10 years ago, and it was New Year's Eve. And for all kinds of reasons that are too complicated to explain, we did not have the physical DNR with us when we went, and it was a hospital she had not been to before. And even though we told them she was DNR, they resuscitated her anyway and had her on the vent. And I had to track down her primary care doctor on New Year's Eve and have her call the doctor in the ER to get him to honor the DNR and explain that mom was not going to get better. And so mom had to go through the whole trauma of being on the vent and then getting taken off the vent, and they didn't give her enough morphine because she had been on hospice care and had been on pretty huge quantities of morphine all the time anyway. So they didn't give her enough, and it was just terrible. And they looked at us like we were monsters and we were trying to murder our mother for some nefarious reason. So just be aware that you need to know what people want very clearly so that you can stare down medical professionals sometimes, because they have biases too. And there's some legal concerns for some of them, I get, but this was very clearly the bias of the people working in the ER, that they were going to revive everyone regardless. So just be clear that you know what your loved ones want.
So I have a similar situation. It was not that extreme, but a year before my father died, he was out of town and coming back from vacation. So he was in his hometown. He became ill. He had surgery, determined stage 4 bladder cancer, and he was in the hospital for like 6 weeks. So we were coming back and forth. I was there the week that he was discharged and sent to the nursing home. So that was the next stage. And I was leaving, though, like that same day or later that day, what have you. And I called my mother, because Mama's still alive, but I called Mama and made sure that it was okay to do a DNR, because this was something he was not going to recover from. She had agreed to that. And so I signed to admit Daddy in and had the DNR enacted for him. I was leaving, and so I also gave them my sister's phone number, because she was coming in the next morning and she would be taken over from there. Okay, so that night, Daddy had about congestive heart failure, and of course his lungs were filling up with fluid. according to a DNR, they should have allowed him to pass away. But because this was in Daddy's hometown, and some staff there were former students of my beloved first cousin, they didn't want that happening on their watch. And so they called my sister, and my sister said to take him to the hospital. And so the whole process got subverted. Yeah. And again, as Sonia said, it's not just emotions that we have. Everybody that's in healthcare, they have their own emotions, their own experiences, their own biases about what you ought to do or ought not do for your mama, your daddy, or your who knows. Right? they have a lot of, and it's not really about what you discussed or decided. It's about what emotions are getting triggered in them, and then it gets played out when it comes to your loved ones. So, they didn't want that to happen. They didn't want Daddy's death to happen on their watch. And so, well, let me do this because we don't need this happening right now. So, those things do happen. But again, now, and again, that's why I say don't just do hard copies, because you can't always access a hard copy. And so even if you're not good with doing things electronically or digitally or whatever, ask somebody who can do that to help you save it, because if we have a smartphone, you have to have some kind of drive associated or cloud associated with your account. Put it in there. Take a picture, scan it, whatever. Put it in there, and then go from there. So that wherever you are, if you need to pull up the document, email it to yourself if that's simpler. So you can save it in a special file or put a star on it or whatever. So you can go there, you can pull up that attachment to the email, and if they need you to forward it to them or whatever, so they can print it, you can do that and access it and be able to say, this is what they have in writing.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And, as a physician, it's very difficult. You have some random person that you've never met who says, this is what Mama wanted. And if you elect not to intubate or not to resuscitate, and then some other random sibling or relative or next of kin shows up and says, she wanted to be intubated, it puts you in a very awkward position.
Yeah, well, again, that's why we cannot have a bunch of people down as a decision maker. We have a person, and some of it depends on relationship and determining next of kin. But even if there are several children and no living spouse, then there has to be a decision which person among them will be the decision maker. So that means they may have to have some conversations on their own. Sometimes they're often very strong personalities, so it just is what it is. So we have people to help facilitate conversations, and that's where our ethics manager comes in. If there needs to be some conversation about what are this person's values, what have they said, and some of it comes from if the person has been cognizant prior to not being, and they have been saying what they do not want, then nurses may document it. Sometimes I'm documenting things because of what people have communicated to me in our visits or our conversations as well.
Yeah, and usually that's, there are times though when things happen unexpectedly, when someone has an unexpected cardiac arrest, someone that you weren't expecting that to happen, and so decisions have to be made immediately, and that can be very challenging. So, as you said, the more conversations, the more documentation that exists, the easier it is for the healthcare team to know what to do.
Thank you. The first, I think is quick, both are to Rev Dollie. Oh, no, maybe the second is so mixed. I am often, well, no, I've not been admitted to hospital so often, but always asked, is there an advance directive of any sort on record with that hospital? It occurs to me that if there have been any changes, though I've not made any, but if I and the one and a substitute were to, I would need to be sure that I was taking at that time or sending at that time the update. Would the other be eliminated? I hope so.
So, yeah, so the one that is effective would be the one with the later date.
Okay.
So, but again, people have made these advanced directives 15 years ago, and then I'm gonna be honest, sometimes even if you did submit it at the hospital, which we had happen, they can't find it. So you just need to have access when you show or have somebody who can access it for you, whether it's going to the underwear drawer, like me, or going to your drive, or you've shared it with them, or they shared it with themselves from your drive, or however that needs to work. But somebody needs to be able to access it just in case, because even if you submitted it, it can get lost because things do get lost in hospitals.
Yeah, I have been told I should take it with me, whether that's antiquated.
No. I mean, that's fine. But again, I just
Well, I don't
we are in a
think
very digital world, and it's not always easy to access hard copies. So I say several forms. I do hard copy. I put one on the chart. I give people extra copies. I say, look, give them to your proxy. So if you can't get to it, maybe your proxy can get to it, and they can bring it in for you, or let them know where it is so they can go to your house, to the underwear drawer, and they can get it out of the underwear drawer, and they can bring it for you. But you can also do it digitally. So you can do it electronically. And those are just options that help make it more accessible today.
The other question, and this goes back to my own parents who very wonderfully had signed, and we've all seen all of, well, it really, the same daughter who's mine and was Dick's was also my parents. But the question comes now, that was decades ago that they had committed their bodies to the University of Cincinnati. I have heard after Dick's death that there was a charge by UAB for donation of bodies, and I would be interested to know very much what you know about that.
I have not heard that at all. In that one instance, it did not come up in the conversation that night. The grandson had to sign the disposition form, but that never did come up then. But I don't know what they do now. But that's that anyway, if you're donating. Anyway.
I know who told me that, and as a result, since he didn't live here and his wife were prepared to pay something, they then went on and made arrangements at that time for cremation, and that brings up a question which came to me from Lawton this morning, who's off the fishing tournament, and that is whether you recommend, and if this is too off topic, you just drop it, whether you recommend making cremation arrangements ahead of time, in other words, paying up ahead.
So, I'll just speak as a pastor from the community. And again, we have people who die at all ages after extended illnesses or very suddenly. And a lot of times, families are not prepared, right? So I would say as well, that for your family, it is less taxing on them if you're able. And again, so we talk about justice issues. If you're able, everybody's not able to actually save money or put money away to pay for a cremation because they're struggling just to pay for utilities, which are extremely high right now, right? Or to get food or what have you. But if you're able to go ahead and take care of those things in advance. And this goes to another thing that we need to discuss. Whoever is going to, if you have somebody, people that you know are going to be managing your affairs after your death, and just in the immediate aftermath of your death, they need to know if you have insurance policies or what you do have, right? Or where to find those things, or like my parents both retired from Grambling State University, so our practice has typically been if somebody who's a retiree died, and we call human resources at the university, and if we don't know how to find stuff, you can call human resources at the job, and you can ask them, and they can tell you what coverage they did have through their insurance as a retiree. There are things, military coverage or all that kind of stuff that may be available as well. So again, these are discussions and considerations that is helpful to have and think about and do before you ever get to the point where somebody having to make a decision about where you die, even if it's a funeral home you want or don't want. Yeah.
Just a couple of comments to add to this. So as an intern, a resident, and then an attending physician, I was always told, when someone passes away in the hospital, you sit down and have that conversation with the family. The nurses always wanted me to find out the name of the funeral home. So that's one of the things I always have to ask in that discussion. So if you know the name of the funeral home that you...
That's part of that disposition or the disposition of the body. So somebody has to sign and give that information where the body's going, whether you're doing cremation or burial, whether there's a requirement for transit. So just this week, had a family that's been in the States, most of them in the States, at least, the immediate family, but they're from Costa Rica, so they want to take their loved one back home. So those are the transit is going to be an option as well as donation, and then person to contact. So that's the person who's signing and providing the information. And sometimes you don't know funeral home because you haven't been doing funerals, and you just don't have that information. But you can call back for us. You can call back to the number we provide and give them that information the next day. And our hospital holds that person's body in morgue, and then they will contact that place, that business, and they will make arrangements to come and pick up the body.
And then the other thing I wanted to bring up that you sort of alluded to is autopsies used to be free and used to be, semi-automatic, but nowadays some hospitals would charge for an autopsy. I think
It's not the hospital, it's the coroner. Yeah.
Oh, well, they're coroner's cases, but they're also people who...
I'm not saying the coroner's cases. But if it's not the hospital charging you, the coroner's office charges if it's not a coroner's case or where the doctor has said there needs to be or there's medical reason to have an autopsy. If the family decides we want an autopsy, that's not medically necessary, but they want it for whatever reason. Right now, I think it's $5,000.
And I'm not up to date on this, but I know that we would do, at UAB, we had certain pathologists who would do in-house autopsies.
That doesn't happen. No. That autopsies are not done there. They're sent to the coroners, and that was true at Princeton as well. And I was there, what, 9 years ago. So yeah.
There's a backlog of cases waiting. You have to let people know that that's going to take a long
It will take.
time.
Could be 2-3 weeks before the body is released. And if a doctor does not authorize it as a medical necessity, then the family has to pay up front $5,000.
So there's certain nuances that you really need to check with your hospital. If you want to donate your body, et cetera, check with the hospital you hope to die in, so to speak. What'd you say? Check with the hospital for their policy. Yeah.
I was gonna go back to the question you asked Nancy that, and I'll share this with Lawton since he's the one that asked it, but speaking as a daughter, I was very grateful that my parents made their arrangements in advance. It wasn't very fun going with them, because I did, to sign the papers and pay and make the decisions and all that, but it was such a relief when all the other emotional stuff was going on to know that was taken care of, and I knew who to call, and we had the paperwork and all that. So I do recommend it if you are economically able to do that.
Yeah.
And I think Lawton has made the decision already, but he said he might kind of raise that question for
Right.
others.
It's an important question, and again, it is difficult when you're grieving, even though it is necessary to do all these things, but it's difficult to have to make all those decisions, and especially if you don't know where any insurance policies are, or if you need to do crowdfunding to pay for which are legitimate for a lot of people because they just don't have funding to pay. They don't have funding to pay to live. They don't have funding to pay to die either.
Yeah.
So, but as we're able, I think if we can at least prepare for that. I'm trying to think through that myself because I'm a single woman and I have to give some instructions to people about what I want, and what I want has changed from what I had planned on when I was married. So, we got to do something different. So what is that? What does that look like? What do you have to do to make it happen? Can you save up some money so that at least if you don't have insurance, if you get insurance, I think it's a great thing to do because at least people don't have to worry about where's the money coming from, right? But if you don't have insurance, then how can you start putting aside something, or how can you reduce the cost, or how can you have conversations so that people are not, well, I can't burn my mama. Okay, so, but if nobody has money, that may be the only option, right? You may have to do cremation. And so we have a lot of, again, emotions and beliefs and stuff to manage. That's for the pastoral care providers. That's our work.
I was going to say, this is not always available, but as a pastor, often would go with families who were making those arrangements ahead of time, and also with families who had had someone die, because you're right, you're grieving, it's hard for them to make decisions. Sometimes there's some salesmanship that goes on there that takes advantage of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of good to have somebody with you who is not grieving as intensely.
Right.
So
Who can be more?
ask somebody to go with you, and they will help you. I mean, that's my experience.
And another thing, since we talk about dying and making plans and all that, what do you want in terms of your order of service for your funeral, or who might you want to be involved in that? And what does your family need to know about you that should be in your obituary? Because I've read some recently where important elements of a person's life were left off. Because, and probably I think a grandchild did it, but she didn't know that her grandfather had taught somewhere else other than the place that she knew in her childhood, right? But I knew him from that place, right? And he lived in my town, so yeah. But, important things can get left off. So we can write things down. And again, it's a good way to reflect and to accept our lives don't go on forever. And that's okay, because we should grieve not as those who don't have hope. Amen. And praise the Lord. Okay.
Just a little bit of humor. I had clinic and I walked into the room where the patient was to see her, and she was busy writing, and I said, oh, what are you working on? She said, oh, I'm working on my obituary, which really helped my self-esteem as a physician, as her physician. But I want to, can I go backtrack just 1 second? Pete, we did not talk about the underwear drawer when it comes to power of attorney. Should I be giving a copy of my power of attorney to my bank now that I'm of sound mind, or is that something that can wait?
I would think it would wait. I'd make sure that the agent knows where it is. So if the agent's going to need it to exercise that power, I wouldn't give it to the bank before it was effective, because that may cause confusion on their part. And what I would do is leave it somewhere safe. One thing that I've done a little bit, there's a group that we've done powers of attorney for undocumented people who can be disappeared by the government. And we do them in blue, the originals in blue ink, and we recommend they put it someplace safe, and they decide to tell the power of attorney or whoever, if I disappear, this is where the document is. And I would recommend the same thing if you're going to have it spring on your incapacity, that you tell someone, if I'm found to be incapacitated, it's in my middle desk drawer, because they're going to need it to be able to exercise it, because financial institutions and others are going to probably ask, show me you've got that power.
Any other questions? Or comments?
This is just a comment, and I could be incorrect about this, so this may not be up to date, but I believe this is still true. The city of Birmingham this is not a power of attorney, this is about wills. They used to have a service where you could get a will done for free through the city of Birmingham, and I'll just tell you why. Because a lot of the properties that are out there that are not being upkept and that are hurting neighborhoods or the look of the neighborhoods, a lot of times the problem is that people died intestate and they're just like in legal limbo. And so the city of Birmingham, not under Randall Winfin, it was maybe William, but I can't remember. And I'm assuming it's still there. So I just wanted to say to everybody that I am pretty sure that's still the case. I'll find out for sure. And that's a huge help to people who, as Rev Dollie has pointed out, are folks who are struggling to make ends meet to live. That can really help, and it kind of helps the neighborhood or the community as well.
Thank you. A follow-up to the donation question, that is donation of body. Who would be the, how do I find who to contact, especially whether there is a charge, but what is the process for body donation with regard to UAB in my case?
Dr. Thornley-Brown.
Yeah, my
Pass
friend
it
is in
up.
charge of the program.
Okay, you can contact Molly's friend. She can give you the name afterwards.
She'll tell us.
Or the hospital rep, when in doubt, that's one thing you learn in medical school. When in doubt, refer people to the hospital rep. There is someone, there's a patient representative. Well, no, you just ask.
But I'm not a patient, current.
You just call us.
Yeah, obviously, if you're, how do I put it? You need to do this while you're living, right?
Right.
So, you can't do it after. So you can, even though you're not a patient there right then and there. You can call the operator at UAB and ask to speak to the patient rep. And there are outpatient patient reps and inpatient patient reps. And I'm sure, well, it's UAB St. Vincent now, and I'm sure they don't have patient reps? Well, that's another reason why you should go to UAB.
We don't technically have that position.
Oh, say that.
We don't technically have that position at the hospital.
Interesting. You probably will have one soon.
Very
Social work.
Social worker, they're hospital social workers and clinic social workers. They probably, as one of my social work friends said, social workers are problem solvers. So I would pass the buck to them.
It sounds as though we can go more directly by way of Molly's friend. Thank you.
If you're UAB, yes.
Yes, true.
Michael, you've been quiet. I'm going to put you on the spot for a second. Because you're a nurse and you've worked in all sorts of nursing settings. Are there any insights that you would like to add?
Advanced planning, I think, is the best way to go, if you can. You know, there's people who get hurt at a wreck or something like that and don't have time to do it. But, you know, my mom had advanced directives and she did funeral planning and everything. So when she died, all I had to do was go down there and pick up the flowers. So that was a lot. That was a big relief to me and my sister.
Mm-hmm. There are actually books. There are a couple of books that have been written that can guide you through. You can get them on Amazon. That can guide you through like every step.
And there's some free little ones that, and funeral homes, they always have information on pre-planning.
I thought they just had fans, but they have.
You have to go to the right funeral home to get the pre-planned info.
Anything else? Well, Pete and Dollie, thank you so much. I mean, this is really a good discussion. I hope that we have it recorded. I know there were some technical problems with Zoom. I hope that we have it recorded and we can make it available to other folks, but we'll see. The next session is going to be on, and I am always a little bit calendar, April 11th, and it's called Dementia 101. And we'll be talking about dementia, both from a medical point of view, but also from a family and social point of view. So thank you. Yes. So thank you, everybody, and have a good day. You guys were great. I thought this was really cool. I really love it. Oh, okay. Right. Actually,
I'll send you an email, Nancy.
Jan, we're glad you could join us, and Sonia, and sorry about the technical difficulties. Most of this got recorded, so we will have access to all of it. Y'all have a great day.
That's having really and you know what it occurs to me is that we're talking about the, a lot of folks don't go.
But it was transcribed themselves, and then it gave
Still, I mean, it's even more complicated
and then it actually
in some way.
at one point, but Sonia luckily had been making co-hosts, since she was off-site.
I am a person who,
So Sonia just told them to hang on.
A regular doctor I go to,
Back on.
but it
comes
I just
back
have
on.
a regular nurse.
Two things first, they don't need to be one is.
They do ask.
Come
It is
back
when you get over
It needs-
65. They ask you, have you fallen in the last 30 days?
I realized I was showing, but I wasn't helping, but they didn't let me
They
straight
go
that.
through all of that.
But, but the other thing is, it really wouldn't hurt on me to have a lifestyle travel. If we can make a co-host off-site, that kept us from having to completely restart.
I wonder if we should have,
Maybe they ask more than that.
whatever our company is, come, especially coming up.
Yeah, I think so.
It's not like this space is so big.
did not tell us. I mean, how could we
That
not
would be
have
great
that
if we could put the
conversation?
discussion on this, because it was lots of good
Mother's
information.
ashes were at
Lots
my
of good
dad's
information.
house.
And I think what I got out of it,
My dad died, Dad
I don't know, it's really important to talk.
because mother didn't tell us.
So the way.
That's how my mom was very
Is to go to.
And we recorded it,
Uh-huh.
but there were some glitches, but most of it not unrecorded.
It's
To be fair to me and to my brothers and to my family. But it didn't happen. It was like, boy, oh, boy, you can talk to somebody who's not in family.
Yeah,
Because
well,
we
some
had
of it,
that conversation
just
with
covered
mom.
the difficult conversations part, but it doesn't hurt.
So we're giving up on you. So it'd be like a house organizer. And you could, and the business person would be the one who would follow up. And go, hey, is there any changes? And make sure you have specifics about what they want moving in.
People went through all that stuff, it was so
I think it'd
easy.
be a great idea. And I agree.
So all that stuff I knew, so we got.
This is hard. And it's hard for family members like we were to talk to my.
You're gonna point someone to tell you, I don't want to talk about your kids.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is.
Well, and it's, and the whole thing is about making sure everybody knew, because mom was still alive when daddy died, but she was like, she wanted me and me to speak, my brother to be there for all of that. It's like when the hospice nurse said, you know, do you want to do a DNR? Mom looked at us, and I was like, now you know what daddy wanted, but she just wanted to make sure we felt we were a part of the discussion.
And I think one thing that parents can do, and I say this from personal experience, you're gonna choose someone to be power of attorney, or you're gonna choose two siblings, or whatever. Talk to the kids and explain to them why you're doing what you're doing. It's not because you love one more than the other.
Well, and it's not just, yeah. But it's also not just the power of attorney to know what you want, but other people do to know what you think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here's something, when Mike got sick, my brother-in-law was sick. You know, one brother's in high school and he doesn't have interest in that. My husband has to come to the vacation with his phone. So when the hospital is calling about something, who answers the phone, who reaches with me?
Yeah.
So at one point, they call me, I'm in Florida with my mom who's just been in the hospital. And I get a call from a rural hospital in Alabama about my brother-in-law, we want to do this test, will you approve it? And I'm like, I'm fine with that, but you might want the next vacation to be, I'm just a sister-in-law. And she said, you're the one who's on our way.
Yeah,
So I'm giving approval because I'm the one who answered the phone call. He didn't, no, he wasn't. The hospital just decided I was the easy one to treat.
Well, they make assumptions, because I have a play cousin, I have one too.
Yeah.
I had a play cousin who was in the ICU getting, who eventually got a little bit, a play cousin, not related to me. They don't find with him, but when his actual biological relative, because the play cousin was a black man, when the actual biological relative